everyone, and thank you for joining the first session in the AIA in California's Fire Response Series, Rebuilding and Recovery, Los Angeles County Status Update. As you get settled, please feel free to say hello and where you're joining from in the chat today. And everybody, if they could take a moment to mute themselves if they are not speaking, that would be greatly appreciated. To qualify for continuing education credit, AIA California provides the learning objectives for every webinar and includes them in the PDF presentation that can be made available online. A few quick housekeeping reminders. Today's session is being recorded and will qualify for 2 AIA HSW learning units. On our website, it did show 1 p.m., so apologies for that. We will be going until 1:30 today, so hopefully you guys can stick around and stay with us. For those who stay on and watch live, AIA California staff will report these units to AIA for you and will send you a follow-up on how you can request a certificate of completion. We plan to have opportunities today to ask questions from attendees during the presentation and at the end. Please be constructive in your comments and questions to help foster a positive learning experience for everyone. I'd now like to, here's our long list of speakers that are participating today, so a big thank you to everyone involved. And I will now hand it over to the AIA California President, Karina Mills.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to all of our speakers today. I have the good fortune of kicking us off today. This is the first of 6.
It's up my desk.
Again, if you are able to mute yourself, that would be greatly appreciated. First of 6 sessions to provide information and resources to help members respond across the state. I am going to share briefly how AIA California is coming together to coordinate our response. The disaster in January spans across 3 chapter areas, and we're coming together to focus so that we can avoid duplication and create opportunities for members to engage. You'll hear what's happening on the ground with Los Angeles, Pasadena, and San Fernando Valley AIA chapters. We are going to hear first from the City of Los Angeles. We are also going to hear from City of Los Angeles officials who will provide specific information about programs and process changes. We are likely aware of the stark reality of the disaster and the impacts on the region. There were over 16,000 structures that were destroyed or damaged in January of this year in both the Palisades and Eaton fires. The economic losses are estimated to reach $275 billion, making them among the costliest natural disasters in U.S. history. The fires prompted evacuation orders for approximately 200,000 residents across Los Angeles County. And additionally, the destruction exacerbated the region's housing crisis, with rents increasing 15% to 20% due to the sudden reduction of housing supply. So our coordination effort in AIA California is critical to our response, rebuilding, and recoveries because it allows for united response and resource sharing. This ensures efficiency in deployment of resources, expertise, and volunteers across our affected areas and allows professionals to share best practices, technical expertise, and logistical support to provide stronger and more unified response. In addition, advocacy and policy influence is incredibly important as it unifies AIA presence and allows strong advocacy efforts when working with state and local governments to influence building codes, recovery funding, and long-term resilience planning. Public awareness and communication is incredibly important in working together so that we can provide clear and consistent messaging to communities. Ensuring that residences and building owners understand their opportunity for rebuilding and recovery. For capacity building and training, we are looking for coordinated training programs for architects and engineers in disaster response to ensure more professionals are prepared to respond effectively when disasters strike. And finally, on this slide, long-term resilience and preparedness so that disaster recovery is not just about responding, but also long-term rebuilding for future disaster mitigation. Coordination helps to promote design resilience, ensuring that communities rebuild in a way that is safer and more sustainable for the future. Our disaster recovery plan from the start, we knew we were going to be simultaneously an all-encompassing reorganization of resource constraints that we had to focus on. So this plan addresses three key areas: advocacy, communication, and education. Each of these three circles that you're looking at have an internal and external focus. Internally, we want to help give the profession access to information, resources, and a voice. Externally, we want to show property owners what we can do, what the value of architects are, and how important we are in this process. As we move to a discussion about advocacy, AI California has leaned into our advocacy experience, reaching out to FEMA to request an extension to the deadline to submit claims. We are happy to announce that this extension was accepted and is now extended to March 31st. This is good news, but still not great. And we'll continue to push for additional time to support property owners as they work to submit their claims. Also, we have submitted to the governor's office to request a waiver to allow property owners access to building plans, and in conjunction with local chapters to support professional certification discussions with Los Angeles. We are also working with local chapters. And working with local chapters is a good segue, as I will be turning it over to my colleagues in Los Angeles, Pasadena, and San Fernando components to highlight their efforts on the ground and how they are working together to maximize resources. But before I do, just a quick highlight on social media. Again, looking to our external audience. Next slide, Sarah. We have a lovely shot here of our friend Rocky Rockefeller, who is one of the many folks who's been working on this. Also, just a heads up to all of you that, again, as part of AI California's leadership, we are working to help support an external media campaign to allow our audience to understand how we are helping and how they can contact us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hava.
Here I am. So I'm Hava Danielson. I'm president of the AIA Los Angeles chapter. And I want to introduce myself, first of all, as a native Angelino, and begin with something that has become a mantra of mine. None of us has ever been here before, not at this scale and not in these kinds of locations. The winds drove fires from the kind of canyon settings where we are all used to them beginning into neighborhoods that are urbanized, certainly urbanized by LA standards. We all need to learn new lessons, and that is what we are doing now. Yeah. There is a lot we do know that we can begin with and act on. And our goal as AIA California, as Karina just explained, is to work synergistically across each of the Southern California chapters, playing to their strengths alongside many vital community organizations that have stepped up. We see our job in the coming weeks and months to build upon each other's hard work and bring that information together to centralize sources and locations, share, learn from each other, and improve upon each other's efforts. I am going to ask people to mute themselves. I'm hearing a lot of other voices. So Sarah, if you could go to the next slide. We have these 5 pillars, anyways. So first of all, rapid response and mobilization. The AILA established the Wildfire Disaster Response Task Force, and you will hear from them later in this session. We attracted 550 volunteers, and over 2 meetings, we engaged over 800 participants. Among AILA's strengths has always been our longstanding relationships with public agencies and officials. And this has proved invaluable as we continue to provide a conduit, act as a voice for the profession, and work hard to influence conversations and the crafting of ordinances and government responses to the emergency. So, advocacy and policy influence. We've been able to leverage our longstanding relationships with public officials on a number of fronts. We actively shaped the self-certification policy proposals that Karina mentioned as an AIA, along with AIA California. We supported their efforts at the state level, and they supported our efforts at the local level. We've testified at city council hearings. We've advocated for architects' inclusion in decision-making. Among those efforts have been opening lines of communication with the Blue Ribbon Commission that has been initiated by Supervisor Lindsay Horvath's office. And we've organized a roundtable with some commission members and other thought leaders to advance recommendations for sustainable rebuilding, and that roundtable is coming next week. Education and knowledge sharing. The Wildfire Disaster Task Force is organizing, with the support of AIA California, this webinar today, which is the first of 8 educational seminars on fire resilient design. We've collaborated with AIA Pasadena Foothill to bring together allied disciplines to develop truly valuable best practices and recommendations that are inclusive of all of our expertise. Our team is working on a series of podcasts with hosts with wide-ranging expertise, such as insurance issues, things that are of urgent interest to community members who've been affected by the wildfires. Community engagement and support. The Wildfire Task Force members are present and participating in community member meetings, including the Palisades Recovery Coalition, City of Malibu building design town halls. We are participating in recovery resource fairs. We've mobilized our volunteers to join AIA Pasadena Foothills Ask an Architect program. And we're working with the Palisades community on a digital tool to connect community members with architects. And finally, in the realm of collaboration and leadership, we look forward to continuing to join forces and work together with each of you. Thank you very much. I hand it over.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jody Mendelson, and I'm actually an AIA LA member, but I worked for a long time in Pasadena and South Pasadena. And when the fire started happening, I relived my trauma as an 11-year-old during the Northridge earthquake, which actually motivated me to become an architect and get my SAP. So I jumped in right away with the AIA Pasadena Foothill, and I am speaking on behalf of Jessica Orlando, the VP who couldn't make it today, to share what the AIA Pasadena Foothill is doing. And our focus has been public-facing activities with an immediate response on the ground. Next slide, Sarah. So we created the Ask an Architect program, which is a matchmaking service between community members, actually of both fires, both Eaton and Palisades. And we're very grateful to the AIA LA for putting out the call for architects. We're up to about 105 volunteer architects now, and we've received requests for matches from about 108 community members. And we've provided 3 trainings, and we now have the trainings, the last training recorded with a 26-page FAQ for every question anyone can think of, ranging from insurance, debris removal. Energy efficiency, and a link to additional resources at the end. And this is a living document that is a resource to all of the volunteer architects. And then we have an intake form on the Pasadena Foothill website for volunteer architects as well as community members who can put in the basics of how they want to be contacted, how they want to interact with their architect, and what kind of information they're looking for. The goal of the program is first and foremost to protect the public welfare, which we're all very familiar with as architects. And we want to be an unbiased, accurate source of information for the community members. We are not selling or marketing any services, and we're pointing to as many resources as possible, including the directory of both the LA and Pasadena Foothill chapter directories. And we're sharing high-level information with the public and about how to protect themselves, how to find architects and other reputable building team members. Next slide, Sarah. So people have been meeting in person, virtually, or on the phone, or even text messaging. We're working with whatever the community member is comfortable with. We have an internal Microsoft Teams chat that we're all sharing information with each other as we get them. Most recently, property taxes has been a big question, and just trying to answer the public's questions about what the implications are for zoning. And we're also providing the FAQs as a short form 2-page synopsis for the public, and it's on the website. It can be distributed to anyone, and it's also translated in Spanish. And we've requested the architect's language capabilities, so we're trying to match Spanish speakers and Chinese speakers with one another in any language possible. If there are any Vietnamese speaking architects, I would love to meet you. Next slide, please. So we launched about 3 weeks ago, and I told you the numbers already. We've we've partnered closely with SoCal NOMA and attended theirs and SCI-Arc's recent events. We are sharing the FAQs, the long form, with anyone in the organization. We just ask that the long form not be distributed because, as you know, it's a living document and we want to ensure accurate information is being distributed. Next slide, please. And we have a list of all the future events. Anyone who wants to partner with Pasadena Foothill, we'll put your event on the internal calendar and make sure that we get the Ask an Architect program table to your event. And then we've also put this more aesthetic roadmap to rebuilding document together. And that's also publicly available and distributable. Next slide, please. So what we've learned so far is we're really honing what the 110% rules mean in collaboration, thanks to all the public speaking engagements the building departments and the planning departments from both fires have provided. We're really grateful for that. You know, the order of when things can be built, temporary structures, etc. Foundation reuse has been honed as well, whether or not foundations can be reused. We've been gathering materials for right of entries and future rebuilds, and we're trying to point members of the public to reduced fee architects or architects who are willing to do pro bono advising services. Really the number one goal of the program is to filter out scammers and help the community members learn how to advocate for themselves and understand the process by which they see those red flags of people who don't have their interests at heart. And then understanding the costs are a big one. So we, at an individual and an organizational level, have been trying to connect architects and builders together and really encourage builders who might not see a $700,000 home in their purview. If they can get economies of scale, then they're willing to come to the table with those conversations. And, you know, just constantly clarifying the FAQs. We're updating it at least once a week, and just getting getting the word out to the community members about this program and to architects who would like to sign up and do some good has been a very exciting, dynamic process. Next slide, please. So the upcoming events we have are a roadmap to rebuilding in-person event at Parsons in Pasadena this Saturday. And that's also on Zoom for anyone who wants to sign up on Zoom for that. And then we're collaborating with USGBC on an April 12th event. We are engaging with SoCal NOMA, with Pasadena Heritage, and some other grassroots local organizations. And I think that one thing I would personally like to see us doing is Altadena is, they're really strengthening their collective rebuild efforts. Every block, they're trying to assign a block captain to. And one vision I see, not just for Altadena and Palisades, but the rest of the city, is how do we encourage that rebuild to increase collective action and share this information for the homes that are certainly not haven't burned down and have a lot of hardening that can be done at a very inexpensive way. So I'm hoping to collaborate between the two chapters to get the public education out there as well. Next slide. I think that's it for me. Yes, passing you over to San Fernando Valley.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. I'm the current president of AIA San Fernando Valley. I am not a native Angelino, but it's been my home for the last 25 years, so I feel like I'm as native as anybody these days. I just want to say that, these fires have kind of, I don't know, we've ended up at a point where I feel like I'm in a good position with advocacy to really help our chapter and our partners really make a difference in responding to this. So on that note, our chapter has been heavily advocacy focused. And we've kind of developed a few initiatives that are a little less publicly facing, but are intended to help those affected by the fires kind of behind the scenes. So we're a lot of sole proprietors in this chapter and a lot of residential architects. And on that note, we've been trying to utilize the technical expertise that comes from that to identify, address, mitigate any potential issues that may come up in the rebuild process, and to work with our partners and various other organizations, including our sister AIA chapters and some other Valley organizations like the Valley Economic Alliance, to provide assistance and technical expertise where we can to help steer them in the right direction to bring their resources to bear on this disaster. We're also working with the ICC on setting up a working group to identify some potential code changes and changes in the rebuild process and permitting so that we can kind of streamline this and get people back into their houses or, businesses going as quickly as we possibly can. Internally, we've been running a pretty robust advocacy committee where we've had several meetings where we're just sharing information and trying to build a much more cohesive picture of what the actual process of permitting is going to be like, particularly in the city of LA. It's a work in progress yet, and hopefully we're going to be producing a document at some point that will be a little more of a roadmap of how to proceed. So that's pretty much what the San Fernando Valley chapter is doing right now. And handing you back to AIA LA.
Yes, thank you. So this is the first in a series of currently planned 8 webinars. We feel, and you can hear from the comments of AIA San Fernando Valley and AIA Pasadena Foothill, that one of the most important things is to keep information reliable and up to date. There's a lot of moving parts going on in our recovery efforts. There's a lot of, it's sort of all hands on deck. And I think one of the most important things is to work hard to remove redundancies and also to create a source where the information is reliable and people can count on it. I did want to mention that one of the things we're doing is working with the AIA California to gather information from all of our chapters and committees and commissions that are out there and neighborhood groups for a centralized website. And you'll be hearing about this in the near future. But the idea is to have a reliable landing place where information there is information that people can count on from reliable sources. With that, it is my pleasure, and I guess, can someone tell me, are Kira and Mitch in the room?
I'm here.
Yes, me too.
Wonderful. Perfect. All right. It is my pleasure to hand this webinar over to two people who are going to kick off reliable, responsible, up-to-date information about recovery. It is my pleasure to introduce Kiara Barnett, co-chair of the LA County Rebuilding Program, and Mitch Glazer, Assistant Deputy Director of LA County Regional Planning. Kiara Barnett is an employee of the County of Los Angeles for over 25 years. She has extensive government experience in municipal services. She is a registered civil engineer, a Master of Science in Structural Engineering, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Cal Poly Pomona. She's a certified access specialist and is currently serving as president of the City and County Engineers Association. Mitch Glazer has been a member of the LA County planning team for over 23 years. He's held various roles in code enforcement, long-range planning, and current planning, and formerly served as a hearing officer. In his current role as an assistant deputy director in the current planning division, he is helping residents and businesses in Altadena, Sunset Mesa, and other unincorporated communities rebuild and recover after the Eaton and Palisades fires. And it is my pleasure to welcome them here to share their knowledge and current activities with us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm properly embarrassed and very impressed, Mitch, to learn more about you in this way. But just really want to thank everybody for inviting us here today. It's really great actually to hear what you're working on, and then really our collective efforts to serve our communities who've been devastated by the recent wildfires and assist with rebuilding. So following the devastating Eaton and Palisades fires, LA County stood up a recovery structure. And it consists of a number of task forces from debris removal that we're dealing with a lot now, watershed management, preparing for these storms like we had the last couple of days. We have a schools, a utilities, these various task forces. But Mitch and I are here today because I honored Public Works to be co-chairing with planning. And we work with co-leads from the other impacted cities, obviously including City of LA, City of Malibu, City of Pasadena. And so work and City of Sierra Madre, and so all of our permitting departments as well. So the LA County permitting departments, we primarily call those planning, public works, fire department, and public health. We have longstanding relationships to ensure collaboration on all permitting activities in the times of an emergency such as this. During the 2018 Woolsey fire, the permitting departments formed a dedicated team of staff that provided consistent direction and action for survivor applicants. And similar models are being set up and expanded for the Eaton and Palisades fire. So LA County has set up one-stop development centers that Mitch will be talking about a little bit more later in both Calabasas, and stood up an office in Altadena with the goal to expedite permitting for rebuilding efforts. So the permitting departments develop and share online resources. What's been great about this is we have collectively been having one primary source. So if there's one location that we refer people to for comprehensive information, it is recovery.lacounty.gov. And then at recovery.lacounty.gov, we have a rebuilding page where we're posting mapping resources for private properties, information about public infrastructure where there's sewer and septic. We have fire rebuild reports that we'll discuss in a little bit more detail that for each property. There's information about, again, their prior building permits, their assessed square footage, prior planning approvals. And one thing that we've done more recently is post comprehensive frequently asked questions. So again, those can be found at recovery.lacounty.gov/rebuilding. And so they'll be routinely updated to, again, reflect what it is people need to know. And we're also working on a page called Road to Rebuilding. And we're hoping to post that soon, where it really does have a step-by-step guide, because we know, again, we have residents who never anticipated, right, rebuilding their structure. And so people really need to know, what does that mean? What does it look like? So happy to hear that you guys are working on those efforts and overlapping where we can. And from there, a couple other things we're working on is a resilient resource guide, rebuild resource guide, we're calling it. We're working on a pre-approved plan program. And so please do stay tuned to that website, and that's where information will go as it's provided and ready for sharing. And then Mitch, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you to talk about how to apply for permits with Epic LA.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kira. And I want to thank the AIA for hosting us today so that we can share some information. And Kira already touched upon some of the information I'd like to share. So first of all, I'd like to talk about how to apply for permits. And we do have one-stop permitting centers. So what I'd like to do, I don't have a slide deck today, but I can, I believe, screen share to the website, and let me find that button. There we go. I think I have it. Okay, great. So yeah, let me actually start. I've got both our department's website and the LA County Recovers website. So for the first one-stop center I can mention, it's in Altadena. We had a temporary location that was co-located with the Disaster Recovery Center, but we have a permanent location that opened last week. If you can see the screen, the hours are 9:30 to 6, Monday to Friday, and then 8 to 1 on Saturdays. And as you might expect, we've already seen a lot of folks come in. And the value of the one stop is that we have all of the permitting departments available. And certainly we accept walk-in customers during those hours, but we also have appointments that folks can schedule, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. The other one-stop office to highlight is in Calabasas, which is generally convenient for folks that were impacted by the Palisades fire. So the hours there are a little bit different, especially for planning. It's just weekday mornings from 7 to 11, and we are seeing a lower amount of customers at that location, but we just ask for folks to sign in by 11, and we're happy to stay and help other folks. So in terms of the appointments, I'll switch now to the LA County Recovers website. Again, that's the central location for information, in addition to our department's website. And so for the Calabasas office, the appointments are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Those appointments are offered between 7:30 and 10:30, and then 8 to noon on Saturdays. So that's more frequent, of course, than the walk-in hours that I just mentioned. Altadena, the hours are a little bit different because the walk-in hours are different. So those appointments are available on Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9:30 to 12:30, and then Saturdays from 8 to 12. And I do see, Henry, your hand raised, so I'll go ahead and take a break here in a second. But the other thing I wanted to mention before moving on is that although those are the two field offices where we expect most disaster survivors and their representatives, such as yourselves, to attend, you can come visit any of our field offices. So as you can see here, We have one in Arcadia. We have one in La Puente, East LA, you name it. So you're welcome to visit us at any of those locations. Our disaster recovery specialists are working out of the Altadena and Calabasas offices, but we have provided training to all of our planners, so they should be able to help you. So let's see. If somebody wants to unmute Henry, I'm happy to take his question at this point. Unless you'd rather wait till the end, I'll defer obviously to the event organizers. I'm not sure how you want to do it.
Yeah, Mitch, maybe we'll just wait till the very end, and
Of
we'll
course.
we'll have plenty of time for questions. We'll collect everyone in the queue. So Henry, you're up
Absolutely.
first. But
Okay, fantastic. We'll keep it going. So now that I've talked about the offices, the next thing I'd like to narrow in on is how to submit applications. And there are a couple of ways of doing that. The first, and we think the one that will be most common, is to submit online. So again, you can go to the LA County Recovers website, and then under Rebuilding, you can go to Apply for Permits. And this brings you to our Epic LA system. So if you've had projects in unincorporated areas in the last several years, this should be familiar to you. So you can submit completely online. There's an apply button. You can say no thanks to the survey like I did, it's your choice. And then you can go ahead and search. As you might expect, we have a lot of different permit types, but you just type in county recovery and you can see we have our temporary housing permit application as well as our rebuild application. We think there will be a third application soon for accessory dwelling units, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. We also have the application forms themselves. Again, they're on the LA County Recovery website, but we have them on our website as well. So just to show you what they look like. And again, you can fill these out, print them, and bring them to a field office if you'd like to visit with someone in person and submit an application. So let me go ahead and start with the temporary housing one. So we're trying to keep it simple. We're asking for a basic site plan. Oftentimes we can even print out an aerial photograph from our GIS system and have folks just draw the location and the footprint. It could be a recreational vehicle, a manufactured home, or a mobile home. And then you just need to show us where the potable water connection is, the wastewater connection, and the electrical connection. And so without requiring a whole lot of plans, we're primarily relying on the property owner to initial a series of acknowledgements. This language is based on our disaster recovery ordinance, which the director was able to implement when the disaster was declared. And since this is meant to be an in-person application, you can go ahead and submit the property information. Obviously, if you submit online, we don't need that because you can enter the address and assessor parcel number, etc. So with regard to the rebuild application, we have an informational box. We attempt to explain what like for like means, but I'll get into that in detail in a minute. And then we also explain that although like for like is a term defined by the zoning code, and it means that you don't need to comply with today's zoning code requirements, you do need to comply with current building code, fire code, and health and safety requirements. And we provide some examples of that for informational purposes. We also talk about what you need to submit. This is something that's changing, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. So what we ask for is if you've done projects with planning in the past, you understand that we just request architectural plans. So we get into some detail as to what we'd like to see. There's a building table that's primarily for our colleagues at Public Works, and then proof of ownership if necessary. Again, you'll see there's a series of acknowledgements, pretty standard from our other locations, lobbyist statement, etc. And then we do need the property owner's signature. And again, we have that space for the property information if you're submitting in person. So what I want to highlight is what we explain here is that we only need the architectural plans to start our review. And after we determine whether your project qualifies as a like for like, figure out if you need additional application materials and finalize the scope, then we'll ask for more detailed architectural, structural, and energy plans, which is typically what you would submit to Public Works Building and Safety Division after planning issues your approval. And so the logic of that is, and again, I'll talk about like for like in a minute, is people may submit plans and we say it's not like for like. We tell them that it might be a lengthier permitting process. It could even be a discretionary process with a public hearing. And our experience with the Woolsey fire was that when we share that information with folks, they change their minds and they say, actually, I want to roll my proposal back just to like for like and keep it simple. So obviously, we just wanted the basic plans because to get the more detailed engineering plans, there's a lot more cost and time involved. However, we know that there are many property owners represented by folks such as yourselves who are very familiar with the regulations in the county process. So what we're planning to do is to update this to allow property owners to have the choice to submit the full plan set up front. At the risk of understanding that we may come back and say it's not like for like and it's a lengthier process. So we are going to be making that adjustment soon. And of course, as you can see from both of these applications, it's the county logo. And as we've explained, this is one application for all the departments. So we ask for the application once. And as I mentioned, as the project moves through the process and goes from planning to public works, fire, and public health, we may ask for additional information and more plans, but we're not going to ask for another application again, as long as the property owner is the same. So we think that's a great process improvement, and we do hope that eventually we can incorporate some of these new processes into our business as usual, so to speak. So just wanted to share that, talked a little bit about the checklists. Let me see if I think I can go ahead and stop screen sharing if I can figure out how to do that. Okay, I think I stopped. So, and if I didn't, just bear with me, please. So let's see. So in terms of how many applications we've received so far, we've received 76 rebuild permit applications for properties impacted by the Eaton fire and 22 rebuild applications for properties in areas that were impacted by the Palisades fire. So 98 total, obviously a small fraction of the volume we expect to see, but still many are already in the queue. And we haven't issued any rebuild permits yet. And that's because they're going through the process, because after planning reviews, again, that's where the more detailed plan check occurs. And although we do have 98 applications, they've all been received fairly recently. And I do want to clarify that we are accepting permit applications for rebuilds whenever a property owner is ready to submit. But of course, the phase 1 and phase 2 debris removal must be completed before the permits are issued and can start construction. And that's on rebuilds. Temporary housing is a little bit different. When you look at our temporary housing application form, there's an explanation as to where you can locate the property. And if there is debris, either elsewhere on the property or on an adjacent property, one of the acknowledgements is to make sure that the property owner is aware of the potential health risks. So yeah, I think that covers submitting applications. Another thing that we'd like to share is long-term, we're going to be creating and hosting a public-facing dashboard for both fires to report rebuild permit metrics, similar to what we created for the Woolsey fire. So Kira and I are working with our IT staffs and many other folks as we speak to make that happen. So now I'd like to transition and talk a little bit about what's like for like and what's not. So as I mentioned earlier, like for like is a term defined by the zoning code. It's a legal term. And essentially, the like for like replacement structures must be substantially the same size, in the same location, and for the same land use as a legally established, damaged, or destroyed structure. And in terms of determining what was legally established, we'll look at all of the information we have. We may have previous planning approvals, especially if the structure was built recently. We may have building permit records. We may have assessor records. We have access to all of that. And we can even look at photos. We can look at aerial photos. We have our own in our GIS system. Certainly, we can look at Google Earth, Google Maps, Google Street View. So we're open to any information that folks can share with us. So although I've explained what like for like is, they may be approved with modifications, with some caveats. So this is the 10% rule that I know folks are familiar with. So a like for like structure can be approved with modifications if they don't increase the floor area, the size, the height, or the building footprint by more than 10%. However, I do want to share, and this is something the city of Pasadena is doing, and we're following suit, is we're instituting a minimum floor area or building footprint increase, which is 200 square feet. So if you have a smaller house, for example, 1,000 square foot house, you can add on 200 square feet instead of just 100. Going back to height, again, another caveat is you can go up to 10%, but you can't exceed the height limit for the zone unless, of course, the previous structure exceeded that height limit. So where like for like, I think, is most helpful is if you have a building that does not conform with current standards in some way. Setbacks is probably the most common example. Another example might be if the land use is no longer allowed. Let's say the property owner is in a single family residence zone, but they formerly had a duplex. They can rebuild the duplex. Where like for like is less helpful, obviously, is if it's the opposite situation where maybe the current zoning allows more construction than was previously the case with the destroyed structure. To use the example of a single family home, you have a property with a single family home that was destroyed, but the current zoning allows an apartment building. So obviously not doing like for like allows you to build to that density. So again, I do want to make clear, as I mentioned earlier, like for like is a term specific to the zoning code and current building code, fire code, and health and safety code requirements will apply. Please see our application form for more details or to contact us, please, at the one-stop centers or by email, phone, whatever is most convenient for you. As mentioned earlier, we have received information from the assessor, and even like for like proposals may affect property taxes, but I believe that information is available as part of the frequently asked questions on the LA County Recovers website. So if a property owner decides to have a rebuild that is not like for like, current zoning code requirements will apply. However, we've formed a special disaster recovery team, and all reviews and re-reviews will be handled by that team of planners, and they'll go towards the top of the pile. The analogy that our director likes to use is that like for like is the fast lane, not like for like is the medium lane. I do want to share that in Altadena, if a rebuild is not like for like, generally I anticipate it would still be a ministerial staff level review. A public hearing would not be required. When it comes to current zoning requirements in Altadena, setbacks are an important consideration in oak trees as well, because oak trees are protected in the county, and encroaching or removing an oak tree permit, an oak tree will trigger an oak tree permit. And in some instances, that's a discretionary review with a public hearing, and setback modifications are also a discretionary review with a public hearing. So we will expedite those, but when it comes to public hearings, because of the noticing requirements alone, typically it's going to be 6 months from application submittal to the public hearing at the earliest. And again, that's based on getting any follow-up information or plan corrections as soon as possible. So I do want to talk a little bit more about temporary housing and especially accessory dwelling units. I know that there's some confusion about that. When it comes to temporary housing, we're talking about three things: recreational vehicles, manufactured homes, or mobile homes. And a property owner can have that on their property as long as they lived in a legally established single family residence accessory dwelling unit or caretaker's unit that was destroyed or made uninhabitable. And that's up to a year before. And folks can just show us driver's license or other ID, utility bills, whatever they have to demonstrate that they previously lived on the property. Now, let's say there's a scenario in which there was an ADU on a property in the single family home. The primary unit was destroyed, but not the ADU. So the household can live in that ADU. Technically, it's not temporary housing because it doesn't need to be removed from the property. It's not an RV, manufactured home, or mobile home, but folks can live in it while they wait for the primary dwelling unit to be reconstructed. And it's already approved. That's not something that needs an approval from us. So when it comes to rebuild projects, someone may want to rebuild and then add a new accessory dwelling unit, or maybe multiple accessory dwelling units. As folks know, state law and county policy does allow for that. So if that's all being done concurrently, you can file the rebuild application that I highlighted a little bit earlier. But the scenario that's a little bit unique is, what if somebody wants to build just one ADU, what we call a standalone ADU, as interim housing while they wait for the primary unit to be rebuilt. So it's similar to the last scenario I described, in where the ADU survived, but in this instance, a property owner says, hey, I'd like to just build an ADU for now and then rebuild the remainder later. So that doesn't quite fit in with temporary housing, and it doesn't quite fit in with rebuilds either. So we decided to create a third application form specifically for that scenario, and we will explain in all three applications how they relate to each other and which one you need to file based on the scenario. So we will continue to update our application forms and other materials as we go along. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Kira at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. And that is one of the things I've enjoyed the most, is working together on these unified applications, right? Where, again, a resident comes in and they need to rebuild, and they just come to the county to file the application. And then we're working through on the temporary side that workflow. And similarly, we'll be doing that for the rebuilding and the standalone ADUs, how those get termed. But really do think that's going to be of great benefit to applicants to streamline the process. So other things that I wanted to share is we did host a kickoff with building industry, what we called a rebuilding workshop. Hopefully some of you were there. But really the purpose of that first session of a rebuilding workshop for us was to solicit information from designers, architects, engineers, contractors on our permitting processes, where the pain points are, what are some of the innovative ideas out there for construction and design and permitting. We also that day shared some contracting opportunities. But that really will be the first in a series of workshops that LA County is going to hold with both the building industry, and we'll have a series with community. And so really we will continue to look to solicit feedback on permit streamlining, innovative housing solutions, resilient building materials. And so we are finalizing now a post-event report. And so stay tuned again for that recovery.lacounty.gov. Rebuilding page. We will end up putting up that post-event report so you can all see that as well. And then one of the things that I was going to talk about today is prospective changes to the building code. So Mitch did a great job of talking about like for like, and basically if a rebuild project is like for like replacement, it does not need to comply with the current zoning code requirements. Rebuilding projects do, however, need to comply with the current building code, fire code, and health and safety code requirements. So there are some things that are for the Eaton fire. We did have a series of suggestions for streamlining permitting. And so some are going to be used on the Eaton side. Those include allowing for 2020 LA County code. So if somebody already submitted the plan on a 2020 code or the current code cycle, so we know that some people have recently built and lost their homes. So we're not going to require a plan check on the public works side. So if somebody comes in and they want to, initiate that construction again on a 2020 or 2023 code cycle, they'll be able to, clear their agencies, issue that permit, and fast track that rebuilding process. Another thing that we have is suspending geotechnical reviews for fire rebuilds only when replacement is in kind is determined, except for if there's a fault zone analysis, a new debris flow or mud flow prone area. And so again, these are the things we can discuss with both property owners, their designers, or both at our consultation appointments. We can talk property specifics at both the Alton, Altadena starting next week, and already we have those consultation appointments in the Calabasas office. For green building code requirements on the Eaton fire again, we've suspended section 4.106.4.1, which is raceways and EV chargers. On the plumbing code, we suspended gray water ready requirements. For low impact development, we suspended requirements for buildings that were built prior to 2009, unless they've done an addition or alteration since 2009 where LAD was required, and then for small residential projects. And finally, for grading, we've suspended grading plan check requirements within the building footprint, provided we get a 90% compaction report and a soils engineer observation report during construction. So sharing those, and then I think we've covered pretty well. Mitch covered the one-stop permitting centers, but basically again, they are now open in Altadena and Calabasas. It's again, all the permitting departments together. And so if people do make those consultation appointments, they get to meet with whichever permitting departments will benefit them. We do have Southern California Edison that'll be making themselves available during the consultation appointment hours at the public counter. We get geotechnical materials up there when people schedule an appointment with them. And so really it has been a great benefit to have everybody together in the same space, and look forward to that progressing throughout this building process. But did just want to share a little bit more about the fire rebuild reports that I mentioned. They are live on our website, but really again, you can click on any property. We can get you the link to there. It's on the rebuilding page. If you go under mapping resources, and then it's called fire rebuild property report. But on there, it'll tell people if they're on sewer or septic. It'll have links to any prior building permits, any prior planning approvals. So great information and resources that we've pulled together for each property as they come in, assessor's records. And there, I'll kick it back over to you, Mitch, to have our final discussion topic.
Yes, thank you so much. So just want to talk about state executive orders and board directives. So at planning, we have incorporated the applicable standards from all of the governor's executive orders. There have been many, and we're sure that there will be more. And we've also received directives from the Board of Supervisors. In late January, the board adopted a very comprehensive motion with many directives. I think the motion ended up being a dozen pages or more. And then also, I believe there will be more board motions depending on what rolls out. So that impacts things like the like-for-like rebuild parameters I discussed, temporary housing, accessory dwelling units, etc. So as more executive orders and directives come in, we do have a process where we analyze the documents, find out what applies to us, and then we implement them. And I'm in the current planning division, and we've been closely coordinating with our colleagues in the advanced planning division to make sure that we have a common understanding of the applicable policies and how we need to implement those. And as I mentioned earlier, of course, we'll continue to update our application forms, our FAQs, and everything else along the way. Please continue to contact us for the latest information at our one-stop centers. Make an appointment, or you can just walk in, call us, email us, whatever is most convenient for you. And of course, as one of our valuable partners, we welcome any feedback from the AIA. We may hear some today, but if there's anything else you think of, please feel free to reach out to us. We welcome your thoughts. And so that's going to conclude our comments. So we've got about a half an hour now for the Q&A. So I'll go ahead and mute myself.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We're delighted to have both of you here to sort of share the status update from LA County. For you that may not know me, my name is Will Wright. I work here for the AIA LA chapter, and it's my pleasure to really entertain this Q&A with everybody. If you have not already, please take a moment to toggle the raise your hand feature if you have a question. There's quite a few in the chat, But right now we'll go to Roberto Calderon, who has several excellent questions. Roberto, you're on the call. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I have several points I'd like to hit. I think probably mainly for zoning. So please follow along here. So fire sprinklers, solar appear to be requirements. So I'd like for you to confirm if that's going to be required for a like-for-like scenario. And if they are, if you can please guide us through how we can submit a variance, because I feel, and actually I don't feel, I absolutely know that this is going to be a financial hardship, especially to those impacted in the Eden fire, because I have several clients that I'm in contact with, and this is going to be detrimental to the current budgets that we're dealing with. Also, if you can confirm if natural gas is still going to be available to them. I had heard it was, and so I'd like your confirmation on that. And also like for you to confirm and advise us if you are considering or exploring rezoning any areas in the Altadena area. And then also I'd like a realistic answer from you with this like-for-like scenario to receive a permit in hand within the 30-day window that we've been told.
Okay, I'll take the first few there. I believe it was solar and sprinklers. Is that right, Roberto?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so both of them are currently required. They were something that we did explore with the state. Those are state requirements. The solar is a state requirement, and so that was one that we had proposed, for their consideration. Currently, again, still state required, so solars are still required. Sprinklers similarly required. I heard about gas, so we do require electric ready, but gas appliances are still allowed. And so I think those were the three for me before we kick over to rezoning, and then we can talk together on timelines, right?
Just a quick clarification on that. You're saying solar ready, but you're also saying solar.
No, solar is required. So the code there, it's a state requirement, and so again, that has not been lifted by the state. So I do know, again, there's
is it in talks to get rid of that or provide us an avenue to submit for variance?
I know there's discussions with the state about if it's not waived to, what is it called? It's not incentivized. There's a word when you pay, basically, what is it? Subsidize to subsidize for some people, but there's discussions about that, but not a decision that I have today, Roberto, but you're happy to, I'll put my email in the chat and you can always follow up with me if I have newer information, I'll let you know, but currently solars are required.
Thank you.
You betcha.
All right, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Kara. Those other topics were outside my expertise, so I appreciate that. So yeah, great question about rezoning, Roberto. So it actually turns out that Altadena has already been comprehensively rezoned. The current zoning and land use designations date to 1986, which is when the Board of Supervisors adopted the Altadena Community Plan. So we are proceeding with a series of regional area plans. It's part of our general plan implementation as well as our housing element implementation. So the West San Gabriel Valley Area Plan includes Altadena, other communities like La Crescenta Montrose, and East Pasadena. And it was actually very controversial. At a high level, what we did was to, first of all, reduce density in the hillside areas. And one of the reasons that we did that was because of the fire dangers. And then in the other portions of Altadena, we actually increased density and we allowed mixed use development along the major corridors. So although there was some controversy, we partnered with the Altadena Town Council, which is an advisory body. They advise Supervisor Barger and all of the other county departments, and there was a large amount of support. So the Board of Supervisors indicated their intent to approve the West San Gabriel Valley Area Plan and the rezonings before the fires. But the plan needed to come back as a consent item, and that happened just on Tuesday. So those zoning changes and land use designation changes will take effect 30 days from Tuesday. So they are imminent. I think I can provide links in the chat, so I would be happy to do that so that
That would
you
be
are
great.
familiar. Absolutely. And yeah, again, it is interesting timing, so to speak, that we did do a comprehensive rezoning effort. And we do feel that what the Board of Supervisors is adopting is still appropriate for the community, even after the fire occurred.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Roberto. Excellent questions. Next is Michaela. Welcome.
Actually, there was one more that we didn't hit, please.
Oh, Roberto, yeah, can you just go ahead and remind us what that question was real quick?
The reality of getting a permit for like scenario within a 30-day window that we're under the mandate for getting that permit.
I'll start, Mitch, and I know you have thoughts here too, but so we have all committed, right? We have surge staffing plans, right? So that we can grow our staffing as needed. And so I know planning, Mitch will speak to planning, but they have a 2-week commitment for initial reviews. For Public Works, Fire, we're 10 business days for initial review. And then for us, we will do a recheck for, most of the projects on the Altadena side, but we would do a recheck by appointment if the designer is also available, right? If the owner and designer wanted to come in, we could do that over by appointment, or we're committing to 5 business days. So that'll be 10 business days for the first review, 5 for resubmittals. But again, I think a decision point that people are going to have to make when they submit is, do they want to submit simultaneously? Where again, and I'll let Mitch speak to that if they want to go through planning, I always say planning, what you can build and where, right? And then you move over to Public Works for how you build it. And so I'll let Mitch talk there a little bit about the benefits or the risks of submitting simultaneously.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. And I do think you covered it, but I'll just reiterate, we do have a dedicated disaster recovery team. We do have a surge staffing plan. We may be bringing in contract planners very soon. So it is a 2-week turnaround for the initial review. If everything looks good, we could approve it within 2 weeks and then move it along to our colleagues in the other departments. However, if we need more information or we need plan corrections, when those are resubmitted to us, it'll be another 2-week turnaround. And I think you all know this. Obviously, the things that you can do to help are, first of all, get the information ahead of time, maybe even go to the one stop or talk to a planner, show them a preliminary plan. That helps ensure that we can approve it on the first go round. And then, as I mentioned earlier, when we do need more information or plan corrections, I would just ask that you get it to us as soon as possible so we can go ahead and do that additional 2-week review. And as Kira also mentioned, and I talked about a little bit earlier, our initial thought was just to require the architectural plans so that, first of all, planning could tell the property owner whether it's like for like or not, give them an opportunity to change their mind if they're so inclined. But in partnership with Public Works and the other departments, we're going to change the application form and the process to allow people to submit everything up front. Again, understanding that some folks are more sophisticated, they've done their homework, they've made the decision, and at the risk, of course, that if we determine it's not like for like and they want to change back to like for like, there will be time and expense involved in redoing some of those more detailed plans.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michaela, I know this isn't you, so but you're up next in the queue. So looking forward to your question. There's several people that registered under Michaela Topi, the Executive Director of AIA San Fernando Valley, but the person that's got their hand raised right now, if you don't mind asking your question, that'd be great. All right, we'll go to Harper. Harper, thank you so much for everything you've done. If anyone does not know, Harper and her partner Aaron created the Rebuild LA Slack channel, and I'll put the link into that. Harper, thank you for joining the call.
Well, and thanks to everyone else for all this vital information. It's super, super helpful. I have a question regarding ADUs and how they will be taken care of for rebuilds, specifically like for like within 10%. If they are a conversion of an existing detached garage can that be done simultaneously as a like-for-like rebuild, or will the ADU be done separately as a new build application? And then subsequently, if you have a main structure that you are doing a rebuild like for like on, and you want to add a detached ADU structure, would those be processed simultaneously, or would you be going through two separate application processes?
All right, Harper, I'm going to do my best. I'm not a planner on the front line. What I might do too for you and others that have very specific questions about specific scenarios, you're welcome to email me and I'll pass it along to a planner. But the first scenario I heard was conversion of a garage to a detached ADU concurrent with a like for like. And so going back to the like for like criteria, it needs to be the same use. So you're rebuilding the same structures, the same use, and the same size as before. And generally speaking, from planning's perspective, you can change the number of bedrooms, you know, what's the floor plan. But, and this is on our application form, that if you add bedrooms or what public health calls bedroom equivalents, and you're on septic, then that might trigger additional requirements. So in that specific circumstance, and again, please email me to make sure that I'm sharing accurate information. I do want to check with the planners, but it would need to be two separate applications. One would be for the rebuild, and then the second would be to convert the garage to an ADU. In terms of converting the garage to an ADU, it's a pretty straightforward process thanks to the state laws and the county policies. So from my perspective, if your client wanted to submit both applications concurrently, we could do that, but we would need to first approve the like for like rebuild and then approve the conversion. And Harper, you're gonna have to forgive me. Could you repeat your second scenario, please?
Yeah, and just touching back onto that one in particular, I know this is very specific, but I would imagine it will be done quite often for a lot of people, is will the concurrent application process be allowed? That's wonderful, but will we need to get certificate of occupancy on the build of the ADU, or excuse me, of the detached garage before getting approval for the conversion? Because traditionally you would be required to do that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Harper. My answer is no. My
Okay.
answer is no. We can just approve it. We don't need the certificate of occupancy. And part of the reason I feel relatively confident on that is we have had those discussions internally. But again, I think it would be helpful for folks with specific scenarios to get confirmation in writing. And again, I'm happy to facilitate that. And we have planners, as I mentioned, who have been trained, and they should all have consistent information. But I'm willing to acknowledge that when you have a division of about 70 planners, things could get garbled. So if any of you are receiving information from me today or in an email that's not consistent with what you're told at a one-stop center, please contact me and I'm happy to help sort it out for you. So with that,
Are you able
Harper.
to drop your email in the chat?
Yes, of
just so that-
course.
Okay,
Of
that'd be
course. I'm
wonderful.
happy. Yeah, happy to do that. And yeah, so Harper, like I said, if you could please repeat the second scenario you were posing.
No worries. So the second scenario, I think you almost answered it with the first, which is if it is not a conversion, it is just a new proposed ADU, it would still be a like for like rebuild on the main structure. The new ADU would be a separate permit, but it would follow existing county timelines for ADU reviews, which I believe technically should be quick, hopefully.
Yes, that I think that's all correct. Yeah, that's correct, Harper. So again, we do have to, there's a lot of technical issues, but we don't want to be overly bureaucratic when it comes to the sequencing and things of that nature.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Harper. So we'll go back to Michaela. Do you want to ask your, I believe this might be Nathaniel Wilson. Is this Nathaniel? Are you up next?
I think actually it's my question. My name's Astra Woodcraft. I realize I'm signed in under Michaela.
Perfect. Welcome to the call.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One is very similar to Harper's, but if we have a scenario where someone had an existing attached garage and they want to rebuild the house but make the attached garage a junior ADU, do we need to do that 2 separate submittal process, or could that be done all at once? Another question is, if our office is closer to the Calabasas one-stop center, but we want to inquire about an Eaton Fire rebuild, can we go to either office? And a final question is regarding rebuild under the 110% regarding height and bulk. If we had a scenario where the existing house had a section of pitched roof and a section of flat roof, and we want to rebuild, say, the whole house with a pitched roof, do we just take the overall height plus 10%, or do we need to stay within the original house envelope to fall under a rebuild?
Great. Yeah, those are great questions. So yeah, the first scenario where it's different than the one that I just went through with Harper is it would be a junior ADU as opposed to an ADU, and we know that there are some distinctions there. But again, a like-for-like rebuild is the same land use, and so on that basis, a conversion is technically a separate action. When it comes to which offices you can go to, if you are a client is an Eaton Fire survivor, but Calabasas is more convenient, we welcome you at Calabasas, and in fact, we welcome you at all of our field offices throughout the county that I showed a little bit earlier, and that I can also put in the chat along with my email address shortly. When it comes to the roof measurement, the way that the zoning code defines height is that it does follow the height of the structure, so to speak. So what I would say is that it would be 10% above the pre-existing roof line. So that's my answer, but that being said, there are specific case-by-case things, and if there are outcomes, frankly, that don't make sense, right, and that seem infeasible, then we want to get that input, and I can assure you that we will be as flexible as we can on a case-by-case basis.
Great. If I could just jump in at the end of that there, I will say again, you can, because we have more offices for Public Works, right, Building and Safety, you can submit plans in any office. And obviously online, I would say for the consultation appointments, you will get the best information in the office because they are preparing packets, right? So when people schedule an appointment, again, we'll have pulled all those assessor's records, but some of the documentation is specific to the office. And so I would recommend almost maybe just call, and confirm with when you're booking that appointment, kind of maybe have that discussion with them, because I do think you'd get the best information, but again, definitely trying to make it as convenient as possible for everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Paul, you're up next, and I realize we have quite a few questions, so if we can keep them short, we got about 15 minutes left. Paul? All right, we'll go to May Sung. And May, once again, we're really delighted that you're here, and we are we're so touched by what you've gone through with the loss of your home. So please continue staying involved with us. May, welcome.
Thank you, Will. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question was that I know since school fees and park fees, all those are exempted from the application, do we still need to show the square footage calculation for those fees, or do we just go purely by the tax assessor square footage?
So I heard the first one was school, right? So we do have that on our Q&A, whether school is required. So again, if it's like for like, it would not be, right? Obviously, if you had more than 500 square feet, then we'd have school fees. But the second one I didn't hear, sorry.
So before, when we submit, we had to show all the square footage calculation per school fee and all the and everything. But the thing is that since it's purely the square footage for like rebuild is purely based on the assessor's square footage, which exempts 400 square feet of the garage, correct?
Yeah, and we have all those assessor's records for all the properties. So that's going to be very helpful. So for your particular project, that's where we could meet on those consultation appointments where you could book it on that website. And we'll have your specific, and then Mitch, I don't know if you wanted to talk at all about the assessor's, square footage, right? How we have that, and that is what's going to be used for the like for like. So it's not necessarily that it needs to be matched up with permits once it's on the assessor's records, right, Mitch?
That's
we have
exactly right. If the county's been taxing you for it, it's only fair for us to acknowledge it, even if it wasn't fully permitted. So that's
And so
what we're
then
doing.
it can be built back to code, obviously, is the thing, so.
Right. So my question is that if, say, the like for like rebuild, your house is 1,000 square foot, you're building up to 1,100 square feet, right? But is the garage square footage included in that or exempted from that? Because theoretically, the assessor's record, if your house is recorded at 1,000 square foot, you have another 400 square foot in addition to that 1,000 square foot for the garage, because they exempt garage in the calculation. So when you build back, right, are you basing it off of the 1,400 square feet or just the 1,000 square foot? You only get 100 square foot additional.
And up to 200 now, huh, Mitch? I know you mentioned that.
That's right. Yeah, minimum of 200. So the short answer is yes, you can rebuild what you have. So are you talking about an attached garage or a detached garage?
I'm talking about the assessor's record. The assessors base their square footage on the habitable space only. They exempt garage from their calculation.
I understand. Were you asking about a detached garage or an attached garage?
Attached.
Attached. Okay, then you can rebuild it. You can rebuild the garage exactly as it was before. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're being taxed on it or not.
Right.
We will let you have it.
Right. So the things that you could only so the habitable, you could only go up to 1,100 square feet then.
It's the entire structure. That's why I asked if it was an attached or a detached. So the size of the entire structure, the footprint, can go up to 10% or a minimum of 200 square feet, whichever is greater.
Right, but okay, I think that
you can email me. You can email me, okay?
Email you the exact.
Please, yeah, please. I'm happy to help. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the last question is the Palisade One-Stop Center. Is that ever going to be ever happen or?
So it's open in the Calabasas office. So there is a Calabasas One-Stop Center.
Oh, so you're not going to open a one-stop center in the Palisades then?
Correct. There's the Calabasas office has stood up as a one-stop center and has those consultation appointments already going Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And may the city of LA might be establishing their own. So we'll be connecting with Osama on Monday.
And we do have information. I can actually put it in the chat, but the city of Malibu actually opened a one-stop this week. And so we do have information for all the cities. So I'll go ahead and put that in the chat as well for you, May.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Hey, Will, I got my mute.
Paul, welcome. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, I had a question. My brother lived out in Altadena, and fortunately or unfortunately, his house did not burn, but all the houses around 3 houses burned. And so he's not able to live there because there's no utilities. And it's just like a big war zone trying to get it all cleaned up. Do you have any kind of a timeline for when people will be able to start getting their utilities hooked up?
So I would think that they could do that now. So again, we do have a utilities task force. You have my email in the chat. If you have something specific, let me know. But definitely, as part of the response was the urgent, right? There's homes still standing, getting them reconnected. And then there's long-term, right? What needs to happen with utilities. So I can definitely get you in touch with our utilities folks. If you want to shoot me an email at cbarnett, I'll stick it again in the chat.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Isu, welcome.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, everyone. So, Mitch, you had gotten in quite a bit on the like-for-like rebuild. However, it's kind of not sort of didn't jive with the answer I got when I went into the one-stop or the Altadena Recovery Center, the regional planning counter. They were telling me that as long as they don't care about the footprint, as long as your house complies with Altadena Community District's guidelines, which is zoning, then you can even move your house up to the smallest front yard setback that's on the same block. And that's just sounds so much more lenient than the way you described it. Can you kind of clarify that?
Yeah,
And
totally.
then, yeah.
Yeah, sure. If you have more, that's perfectly fine. So this is, I was wondering whether I should bring this up. This is like super technical, okay? In Altadena, the Community Standards District says that your front yard setback can't be smaller than the smallest setback of a legally established structure on the same street on the same side of the block. And using the scenario that we just heard, if you're the only house left on the block, how is that practical, right? And then if you have a block where there's no houses that survived, the first person that rebuilds sets the setback for the entire block. So you are correct, and that is it is technical, but it is an important distinction that we are allowing people with a like-for-like rebuild to have a minimum front yard setback of 20 feet. That interpretation I sent to the staff on Friday, and our director will be signing an official memo shortly. Now, when it comes to non-conforming side yard setbacks, you can keep those, okay? So the CSD currently requires 10% side yard. And so let's say you got a 60-foot lot, 6-foot setback, but the previous structure was a 5-foot setback, right? And the front yard setback was 30. So yes, you can move the structure forward, 20-foot front yard setback, and keep the 5-foot side yard setback. Our director said that was okay. However, the remainder of our standards apply. The 10% cap still applies. So the front yard setback, you're right, we are being lenient, and that's because the CSD was written at a time when the blocks were substantially developed. And for community character, if somebody built a house on a vacant lot, you'd want it to be consistent. But now that there are so many blocks with no houses left or only one or two, it's not really practical to enforce that.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is what time length that one has to apply for like rebuild. It's not forever, right?
Yes, it's a great question. The zoning code says 2 years after the emergency declaration, which is January. However, the director has the authority to grant 3 time extensions of up to a year each. And the zoning code says it's because you need the extra time. Maybe you're in plan check, right? But I want to emphasize that we're being as flexible as we can. So if people come to us and they explain why they need more time to file a like-for-like rebuild, we will consider it and we'll be inclined to grant those. But I can't guarantee we'll do that in every single instance.
Yeah, I think this is a concern because if someone wants or only has money to build an ADU to stay there temporarily, they are going to run out of time likely to do their single family home under like for like. And then this is something that as architect to advise our clients, this is very important to know. So we don't lead them pin them into a corner, right? So another last question is if they have an existing ADU, detached ADU that was burned down, but their main house exists, can they still apply for like rebuild for the ADU itself?
Yes, if it was pre-existing, if I understood you correctly, the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent questions. Ben, it says Carl, but maybe it's Ben Loescher. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Will. So understanding that that these fires are increasingly, intensifying and becoming more frequent because of climate change, can you guys speak a bit about what the county is doing to appropriately lower the barriers to low embodied carbon, earthen, and bio-based materials that we're finding have real advantages in terms of fire resistance, And I'll say that I'm bringing this up because those of us that have kind of worked with these emerging materials in the county have had a lot of difficulties with the county not having in-house resources that were sufficiently familiar or sophisticated, and some reluctance to engage with outside expertise. So that's one point. And I guess the second one is, has there been any discussion about the county adopting the forthcoming IRC appendices for light straw clay, cob, or hemp lime construction?
Great, so I would say those are items are all under Public Works in our research section. I don't know if you know Eric Rodriguez. Have you worked with our current research section head? So I'd have to put you in touch with him on these specifics, but definitely the code never, always allows for any type of materials, right? To answer your question about so we do obviously have, if we're within the very high fire hazard severity zone, right? There's some minimum code requirements to build, right? Chapter 7A, fire resistant construction requirements. We are obviously requiring it where we're within the fault zone maps, fault zone, within the very high fire hazard severity zone maps. Outside of it, we can encourage it, but we obviously can't require it. And so we are doing a resilient resource guide that will have some information for property owners on things like that. But I think yours is more specific to the materials of construction. And that would, again, be very technical. As nerdy as I am and as nerdy as Mitch and I like to get together, I'd have to connect you with the expert on that, which would be Eric Rodriguez in our research section.
Okay.
I'll make sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you have his contact, I'll leave it. But if you need it in the chat, let me know.
Yeah, thank you. That would be excellent. I think the AIA would love to connect with Eric and identify, innovative solutions, especially as they address embodied carbon.
Perfect. And you'll see some of those in that, what was it, the workshop rebuilding post-event report when it comes out, Carl. So lots of great ideas kicked around that day that we met in person. So
excellent. So we'll go to Gail next. Welcome, Gail. Maybe we'll jump to Rico Michlig, and then we'll go to Gail. Hello, welcome. Thank you.
Hello, hi. Thank you guys so much for holding this. I heard from some people that I guess the survey might be something that is provided citywide by the county. Is that in the works? And if it is, what kind of survey will it be? Would it be just a boundary survey, or will it be a topographic survey?
great, I'll take that one. So for surveys currently, private to identify the property corners does require a private land surveyor. And so the county are out in the Eaton area, and we'll also be in the Palisades area verifying our centerline controls. We do share our information with GIS so that when a surveyor does come in, that information's there. As they get more information, it can all be added to the GIS. We are looking right through different levels of government and philanthropic. When we hear of funding resources, we are looking, right? We've identified a cost estimate for how much we think it would cost if collectively some surveys were done together, but again, funding hasn't been identified to date. So we do continue to look for that funding. So again, that's something you can follow up with me anytime, see if there's any progress. But currently we are telling people that they do need their own private
okay, so to get this clear, it sounds like you guys are looking into providing property boundary and possibly topographic surveys in the future if the funding comes through?
So I would say currently, again, we're looking for the property. So not the topographic surveys, but to identify the property corners. So we're looking to identify funding for that. But again, the funding has not been identified. Okay. So currently we do have to tell people a private surveyor is required.
Okay. I do have another question. Thank you for that. I have a client in Altadena, and she is her property was maxed out in terms of the floor area before the fire, and according to the 110%, she would be allowed an additional 10%, even though by zoning code she's maxed out, right? Is that true?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay,
Great
great.
question, though. You're right. All these clarifiers we can put on our paperwork
Yeah,
comments.
they're fantastic. Yeah, if I could just say, Will or somebody else, if you're able to download the chat, I think Kira and I would love it because we can go through and anything that's not covered in the FAQs, we can add. These are just fantastic
Yeah,
questions.
there's great questions in the chat too, and I see them and I'm like, oh, will that one come up? Because there are great questions there. So I agree. If you guys want to compile those questions, send them in for unincorporated areas. We'll distribute and get them responded to.
Well, yeah, thank you. And we'll definitely do that. I think I'll work with Jonathan Gillian with AIA San Fernando Valley, and we'll make sure that we get a list of these additional questions. I know we're a little bit over time. Do you still have 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to, we have a few more questions here.
Will,
yes?
Can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
Greg and I are happy to cede as much time as possible so that our colleagues here can make best use of Kiara and Mitch's incredible insights.
Appreciate that.
So yeah, Kiara and Mitch will go as long as you want, but maybe another 10 minutes, 15 minutes if possible. Perfect.
Sure.
So Gail, you have your head, and then we'll go to Kip.
Was that Gail Eby?
Yes, welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm wondering, I'm in Minnesota, a registered architect in California, and would like to relocate in historically correct rebuild for a property that's on the market. There's a lot of lots for sale in Altadena, and I'm wondering if any of these benefits to the current victims translate to the next owner.
Well, I can answer that from a zoning perspective. So when it comes to temporary housing, as I mentioned early on, the person had to have lived in a dwelling unit on the property at some point within the 12 months before the fire started, and we ask for documentation. However, when it comes to rebuilds, whether that's like for like or not like for like, that is an allowance that runs with the land, so to speak. So if the property is sold, the new property owner can apply for a like-for-like rebuild and certainly a not like-for-like rebuild that's subject to current zoning requirements.
And I don't want to risk sharing my screen because I know if you couldn't unshare it, Mitch, I won't be able to unshare it, but that is one of the items on our FAQs too. We did put a little section called new buyer's rights. And so that one is documented. So I do think that FAQ resources will be great for all of you. And again, similarly, if you guys want to get it through Will or some other way to say, hey, these would also be great questions if you could get these up, right? Like we always solicit and appreciate your input and feedback.
So the short answer is a lot of these benefits do transfer to the next owner, even if that next owner has not lived on that property.
The temporary housing is one that would not. So again, I'm looking at the FAQ for new buyer's rights. It says if a lot is sold now, does expedited permitting and temporary housing apply for the buyer? So temporary housing would not. I think Mitch mentioned earlier, somebody has to have lived there within the last 12 months, but the expedited permitting would be available to everyone within the 2 years that Mitch mentioned for the emergency declaration.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
thank you.
good question.
Thank you, Gail. Kip Kelly, welcome.
There we go.
There you go.
I have a question about properties up in Altadena. We understand that there might not be a sufficient amount of water pressure available on certain streets up there, and not enough pressure currently to be able to put fire sprinklers in the rebuild buildings. And my question is the infrastructure being addressed at this point as a priority in order to allow people to put sprinklers in? If not, will we be exempt from sprinklers in those properties? And then is in any way the inadequate water pressure going to hold up building permits?
Great question. And I would say, so that's fire department and building officials. So that's when I'll have you email me again. So they're, that'll be like we were talking about earlier, there's the properties that are standing, right? There's some do not drinks that are being lifted now, right? That's kind of actually held our temporary housing. But we had some do not drinks lifted recently, but then the water pressure is another part of it. And so I would say, yeah, just reach out to me on the side there and And when we have those answers, we'll get them up on the FAQs as well. We're gonna have a little utility section. And I can also put you in touch with our utilities task force, who's the lead on water, septic, various utilities like that.
Thank you.
I can get you in touch with the right folks, Kip. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Thank you, Kip. And I know you have a lot of questions for City of LA, so hopefully you'll join March 17th.
Oh, yeah.
12 noon for that.
Yeah.
For the,
And it might just help to say, so we have 9 task forces in recovery. 4 of them, Public Works are lead or co-leads. The other ones are the debris removal, watershed management, and utilities. So that's where, again, Kip, we wouldn't be the experts on it, but definitely have a stake in the game. And so can keep in touch with you on that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
thank you, Susan. Welcome.
Hi, I'm happy to see new faces. I know a lot of people in San Francisco, but in LA, I'm new. So my question is that I heard there is a list of designer architects that I would definitely want to be on that list. Is there a way to know who is skilled in what area and how can we collaborate together? I know architects are skilled in different phases. Some are taking the full scope, some are better in the latest like later, like CD and CA, and some like me are better off with quick design collaboration and design turnaround. So how can I get to know people and just offer what I'm good at?
I think, Will, that might be a question for you, but definitely I know from our workshops, Rebuilding Together workshops, we did kind of put out a survey asking people those kinds of questions, right? Or what industry are they in, right? Are the engineers, architects, contractors, what are their specialties? But we definitely have to determine what we can do with that information, because certainly, you know, with government, we couldn't be making recommendations, but definitely open that up to the table to see. I know definitely there's lots of people who need to connect, right? Designers and builders and so if anybody has anything on that, I'd say I'd open it up to the team.
Well, yeah, well, definitely. And yeah, please reach out to me directly. I can put my email in the chat. With regards to getting your name as an architect listed with County of LA and with City of LA, there are 2 active ways to do that through their contractor list. And they are compiling all this information, not to create direct contracts with the county or with the city, but to, to help amplify those resources. And then of course, AIA Los Angeles, we've published our own list. AIA California is doing a similar thing. And then of course, there's a Designers for LA initiative out there as well. But excellent questions, and we just look forward to getting you more involved.
Yeah,
which
and
is
I'd
a
like
perfect.
to connect with you offline on that too, Will, because at some point, yeah.
Thank you. I was very much like lost. Who do I contact? I have the energy for Rebuild from day one, but I don't know where to start off. So I will look for your email.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And this is an excellent segue to the next section, but I'll give a moment here for any additional questions. We really are grateful for Kiara, my apologies, Kiara.
I like all variations.
Yeah. So a few minutes here. Any additional questions? Any additional comments?
The base one jumped out at me, the 110% height increase, Mitch. I know we can answer these offline.
Yeah, we need to. There's so many great questions, and again, that's why I would love to see the chat so that we can add things to the FAQ. Some of you are already emailing me, which is great. Keep emailing me with specific stuff, because first of all, we can help answer your question. The more specifics, the better. But again, it also helps with FAQs, right? Because I'm sure several other folks will have similar questions as we proceed over the coming years. So it's definitely our pleasure to be here and hear all of this feedback and these questions.
Yeah, thanks for the time. It shows how many questions are out there. And so look forward to doing more of this with you when we're doing our, continuing our series of, rebuilding workshops too. We'll make sure that information gets shared with Will and that it all gets hopefully shared out. But thanks very much for the time and great spending time with you all.
Thank you all. I will now hand it over to both Mohammed Sharif and Greg Kolchowski. I need to pronounce his name as well. Greg and Mohammed are co-chairs of the Fire Disaster Response Task Force. And Mohammed and Greg, welcome.
Thank you, Will. I know that John Chan had his hand up, so we'll make room for John's question shortly if he's still here.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Let me just introduce. Greg, are you there?
Yes. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, Kiara and Mitch, thank you so much for reminding us just how important the public sector is, the comfort, the generosity, the input. Thank you so much. And Will, thank you so much for hosting this. Greg, I'll hand to you first.
Yeah, well, I couldn't say it better. I'm gonna I'll cede my time to get John's question in here because I know we're all up against the clock here. So John, please,
Thanks,
you had a
Greg. No,
question.
appreciate it, Mohammed
Yeah.
and Greg. And no, thanks so much for making a little bit of space because, well, it's sort of like we should do this more often, right? It takes a wildfire for this kind of conversation to happen, but we really appreciate the porosity that's being created all across the profession, but also, you know, with the county. And thanks so much, guys, for making this possible. So I wanted to, Mitch, since you're here, if you still are, you know, from a planning standpoint, I just wanted to raise a real quick question. It has more to do with the back end success outcomes of the rebuilding effort. One of the things that I really wanted to kind of touch on was the ability to have insurance at the back end of construction. It's a huge equation. It's a big calculus for a lot of Altadena homeowners, et cetera. There are instances in which the wildland-urban interface has been coordinated in order to help insurers feel more comfortable that their risk exposure is being reduced. And there are methods, techniques, and technology help to do this. I'm curious if in LA County, if there are any departments or personnel that might be kind of working on this. It is a big effort at the back end. If nobody can get insurance, nobody can get loans. And so that's a question I wanted to pose, and nothing to answer right now, but I'm curious if there are people working on it, or I'm happy to make some introductions to kind of form a task force that does, because I think everybody will be affected by this question. Thanks so much for making the space for the question.
Thank you. And I don't believe Kiara or Mitch are still on the call, so we'll just have to add this to our great list of follow-up items.
It's a really important question, John. I think the future insurability of those who rebuild is absolutely uncertain, and that getting insurance expertise at the table is important. And I think, Will, if I'm not mistaken, between ULI and Greg and the kind of the multidisciplinary approach, we're doing some work together with our sister chapters in AIA California to get people at the table.
Fantastic.
Yes, and I think this is one of our follow-up educational programs. So John, you might have just bought yourself a seat as the moderator for that discussion. So
there you go, John. You're on board.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's the best way to get a job. Just ask a question.
Yeah. I imagine that, you know, I think one of the first questions that Kiara and Mitch fielded today was if homeowners could elect to not have fire sprinklers, which seems understandable in terms of the kind of fiscal dimensions of a rebuild. But then in terms of moving forward, in terms of insurability, and very higher fire hazard severity zone maps being redrawn, that things like that, you know, should be done. And if there are ways for those who are financially impacted in this disaster to be alleviated some other level, whether it's you know, state tax. I think these are questions of the moment, and they are also questions for future citizens who undoubtedly we are all living with disaster, and we need to kind of wake up to that. And yeah, the financial dimensions of this are massive.
Yeah.
So Greg,
So I think,
yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say that I think there's been some information in the chat about upcoming sessions, and so I think we'd like to talk about that just a little bit. I know some folks here signed up for this, might be more interested in LA City, and Will have said a few times on Monday, this coming Monday, the 17th, there is a LA City focused conversation And then the following Thursday, a week from today, there's a conversation with the California Coastal Commission. So please, those will be, there'll be registration links sent out or made available to everyone. And then following that, we're commencing, and this is what Will was hinting at, a series of education sessions on specific topics that will take relatively deep dives through sort of small panel conversations and extended Q&A. And those start on the 26th with home hardening. Again, part of this is to educate architectural community who may not have familiarity with a lot of this in terms of wildfire rebuilds and some of the technical aspects of that. And it goes from the sessions run from home hardening to defensible space, which will be including our allied ASLA partners in that conversation, to information on ground up with Altadena, rebuilding infrastructure, equity, home rights and assistance, legal assistance, looking at other kinds of fire adapted communities, community land trusts, other ownership models. So we're really going to go through probably there's about 12 of them in total. So we're setting up those, most of the panels have been set up already, and we will continue to refine those panels, but they'll start rolling out immediately, and we'll go every other week. The other part of this is that long ago and far away, we had a Zoom call with about 900 people on it. And an equal number or almost equal number, about 500 volunteers that signed up. And so some of you may be on that call right now and wondering like, well, what the heck's going on? How do I volunteer? I think a lot of the activities we've been doing so far is really listening and educating and organizing and meeting with a lot of people. And I know Will's been doing, as is evidenced here, a ton of work on the backside with city officials, agencies, county officials, really digging deep into policy and procedure, et cetera, as we heard about today. I think there's another series of volunteer activities that we can really, we've been talking about internally. And this will be probably ongoing for a while, and they go between the categories of advocacy, education, and communications. And for those of you who have already signed up, we'll be putting together lists. If those of you who are not signed up yet, if you want to put your name out there, it's a lot of people to organize. And so what we're looking to do is really create directed series of tasks. I won't go through all of them now, but there's about 15 very specific kinds of tasks identified there. From helping to draft op-eds and advocacy work, doing an advocacy kind of toolkits, going out to community, going out to town council meetings, neighborhood council meetings, nonprofits, meeting with other local nonprofits, which we've been doing. Folks who as you all know, nonprofits are surging up everywhere that are resident-based and around really, really important issues. I know there were some questions in here about people who did not lose their home, but their homes are damaged and they can't reside in them anymore. There's a community that's organized around that in Altadena. And so I think we're going to be making meetings and trying to push that advocacy forward, help them to push advocacy forward along some of those issues. And then education is, participating in things like that, like this, as well as a series of other activities, and then communications in terms of social media, strapping together a very dedicated website. There's been talks about informational kind of podcasts and other things like that we want to do, but we need people to help with those, and we want to marry expertise with the task at hand. So anyway, I'll drop it to Mohammed too. I talked a lot here, but
that was fantastic.
To give a little bit of an update.
Thank you so much for the summary. That's spot on. I will say that we're also, we as in the task force, President Hava, Danielson, Vice President, President-elect Tony Lewis, Will, Carlo, and the AIA team, we're working kind of around the clock. And one of the things that we're doing is attending as many community meetings, be they virtual or in person, as possible to hear, to listen and learn about what's happening on the street, in the communities, in the Palisades and in Altadena, and that is in a constant feedback loop. And the sessions that Will has put in the chat that Greg just mentioned, they're attuned to that. So we're trying to marry as much of our idealism and pragmatism with our idealism with the pragmatism as well.
Well, thank you, Mohammed and Greg. If anyone has any questions for either Mohammed or Greg, please let us know. We look forward to getting you more involved in this collective effort. John, welcome.
Yeah, and no, I think Mohammed, it's great to know that there's like field work, and it's basically kind of an outreach just to keep in touch with the different groups.
Yeah.
I know it could be very bewildering for many people. Just on the one hand, there's the excitement of motivated mobilization, and it's going in all directions. Certainly the back end, likely some will peter out, some will coalesce and converge. I was wondering, maybe just put an idea on the table, what you guys think about how we as architects can know like who in the AI is involved with which organizations, or listening, to what level we're involved with them. It would be really interesting to understand that landscape, because I think at the back end, our coordinational abilities will likely be needed, as Greg was saying, to match the needs with the expertise.
Right.
Groups are not always, able to do that. So I wanted to put that out and see what could happen.
I think that's a good question. I think one of the things that we've learned as a community of architects in this moment, and I think underscored early on, I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the meeting, when I think it was Kiara Bennett who reported, or maybe it was Mitch, how many plan check applications had been submitted in each of the areas. They were, let's say, surprisingly low, right? 22 here, 70, it was 98 in total. And I think that shows that maybe sometimes we want to help and we're projecting, right? And we want to help the world, and the world is a very big place with lots of constituents. And I think what the world is showing us now, that as in Hava Danielson's message, I think shortly after the fires, is that we're all taking a deep breath and a pause and trying to figure out what we're doing. I can tell you on the Palisades side, we're involved with their kind of the nucleus of that community, and that community is interfacing with Mayor Bass's office, with Steve Soberoff, with the Steadfast people, and that it is. I can tell you that architecture or buildings or homes are not the priority right now. In a way, it's comforting that they are thinking about meta issues like logistics, things beyond the scale of a home, and I think that that's necessary. We're also interfacing. Greg, I can hand over to you in terms of CLTs, in terms of Altadena and toxicity. So, but before I hand over to Greg, I'll just say that less is more. In a way.
And we do have one question before Greg. So,
Yi. Yeah.
Yisu.
Hi.
Welcome.
Oh, hi. Yeah. Hey, so I just wonder, I know this meeting is recorded, and also the future webinar or meetings, is there a sort of localized or focused area in AI website that we can access these recordings in the future? Especially for like friends, colleagues who were not able to be here, and then they have specific questions and you're trying to recall the answer. Sometimes you're not being the best translator. Number one. Number two is it possible for AIA to come up with some kind of comparison page on, say, like for like, and like a lot of these questions we had talked about, and then the county or the city answered, and just have this kind of comparison at a glance comparisons, just so that we get a better idea. Because a lot of time we're talking to a county, we were thinking about Palisades project, which is in the city,
LADBS and LA County are different bodies in that regard, and I think that we can definitely point to the various agencies. That's probably the best thing that we should do.
So Mohammed, my problem with that is I have been to so many of these meetings and the workshop, and mostly concentrated in Altadena area because my home is closer to that. But if we have to constantly relearn as an individual architect and not being able to learn from what you have already learned, it's really exhausting. I was in the USGBS workshop. That week I was completely exhausted from all these.
I know. No, I totally understand, and we empathize. Go ahead. Great.
Hey, Sharif, can I interject for 1 second? The tape of today's program, Sarah in the AIA California office, who's been masterfully handling logistics, it will be uploaded to the same page as you registered on, and we'll make sure people know. So you'll be able to share it with colleagues. Thanks, Sarah. She actually posted that earlier, but I just wanted to make sure you knew all.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And we can link that to the local AIA page as well, LA, so that it's just people don't have to go searching out for it as well, other folks. Yeah, and that will be, just to answer your question, all the subsequent webinars, et cetera, will be the same way. These will all be archived. They'll all be made available. I know we're doing AI transcripts on all this stuff too, so we can see how much of that can be formatted and organized in a way, or just made available as well. Sometimes the text is easier. You can just skip to it, figure out where you need to be.
Yeah.
So we can.
Thank you.
We can do that.
Yeah.
No, appreciate the questions. Those are good questions.
Yeah, and I know that we're right at time, and I just want to say I am super grateful for Sarah and for Tibby's work on this with AI in California. AI in California is the way we're going to collect all this information, whether it's Pasadena, San Fernando, Long Beach, South Bay, LA, because we're all in this together. It's a collective effort, and we're really truly appreciative of everything that AI in California, including Sarah and Tibby, are doing to really help bring us all together. This is a monumental amount of work. And for everyone that's still on the call, if you have specific ways you'd like to help or provide input or resources, all the merrier. We really do appreciate your expertise, and we want to leverage and amplify everything that you're doing. So with that, Mohammed and Greg, do you want to sort of do some final remarks?
So again, thank you, AIA California. Thank Chava and Tony, and to everyone here. We'll keep in touch, and we'll keep going.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would also thank all the allied chapters who are represented here: Pasadena, San Fernando Valley, Long Beach, South Bay. This is a unified effort, and we all bring different abilities and expertises to the table. So it's really great to be working with everybody, and I appreciate it everybody taking their time today for this. I think pretty impactful and useful webinar. So thank you so much. And thank you, of course, to AIACA.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, everybody.